guys, what's going on? Time to do our Olympic preview. Again, I'm going to be keeping it super light this week, but I at least wanted to show some of the model, give you guys a look at my betting card. Definitely going to be in the lighter side, but since I personally won't be doing anything on Draftkings this week because it's not available, I still wanted to give you guys a sense of ownership, take a look at maybe some value plays to consider. We're not going to do the whole lineup build, but like we normally do, but still wanted to point out maybe some pivot plays, some low-owned guys that you might want to consider if you're rolling in that space this week. So let's jump right into it. So what I have put together, so basically I built a model that is really trying to reward ball strikers. So if you remember the course breakdown, Kasumi Giseki Country Club, it's really long. You got to have some distance off the tee. No idea how the rough is going to be this week, but I think for the most part, if you have a good amount of distance, you're accurate with your long irons, you're going to be in good shape. So that's kind of what I reflected in my model. So I brought in stroke gain off the tee, strokes gain approach, driving distance, and then key long range proximity distances. I did bring in fairways gain just as kind of like a tiebreaker. Wanted to see, from an accuracy perspective, how folks are looking. The other thing I brought in was strokes gained putting on bent grass as another tiebreaker. So two things that, again, are a little bit more, at least in the putting department, a little more volatile, but ways to maybe look at things a little differently. Not really putting any weight on around the green because I do think it's going to be gettable this week. I'm sure getting up and down, folks are going to miss some greens, but at the end of the day, they're actually a little larger than average. So I'm not putting a ton of weight on around the green this week. So when you run the model, what you actually see is that, again, just putting kind of even weight on everything. Xander Schauffele is your number one play. He's 8-1. I will not be touching him, but I think he's totally fine from a DraftKings perspective. And honestly, of the guys at the top, he may come in a little bit lower owned than maybe a Victor Hovland, who obviously is fantastic from a ball striking perspective. You would actually probably be on my betting card this week if I weren't just keeping things super simple. But both of these guys I think are really strong at the top of the board. And then two really strong 9K range guys that I like a lot. Paul Casey, who is obviously just a ball striking machine. The only thing holding him back is really the putter. Inverse can be said for maybe Joaquin Niemann. So he's really long off the tee. He is doing a fine job putting on bent grass surface in particular. So these guys, for me, I'd actually probably rate, again, I know the model's not reflecting this, but just kind of a tiebreaker, Joaquin Niemann over Paul Casey. And that's reflected in my betting card. So we'll take a look at him in a second, kind of how I'm shaking out for the week. But I like both of these guys. I would definitely not hesitate to use either of them on DraftKings. Just the key is really mixing in some strong low-owned plays, right? You don't want to play a lineup full of 20-30% owned guys because, again, there's not that many people in the field. So there's going to be some guys that are really popular. But I think the key this week is identifying the right 5-6% owned guy. So Romain Langescu from France, in his limited PGA Tour sample size, has played really well. So, again, you can look kind of recent results, recent form. I don't think he's in that bad of a place, though. So, and 5% owned is kind of a value play to mix it up. I think that's totally viable, right? Then you get into the crew of guys, though, before we jump too far to the value plays, that I like a lot. So Justin Thomas, for me, is who I'm going to be anchoring more or less everything on. So one, I get to root for Team USA. So you can't put any sort of data or analytics around that. But I do like the fact that Justin Thomas has played really well in international competition. I like the fact that he's played really well in President's Cups. He's not coming in maybe as strong form as some of the other guys, but he still tops in this field in terms of iron play and ball striking. The key for him, honestly, will just be keeping it in the fairway. So if he can do that, I think he's actually going to be in really good shape. And honestly, I think he did that at the or the Open Championship, right? So I think that's a good, strong signal for me. I don't think that's an unpopular take this week. I think just looking around, a lot of people like Justin Thomas this week, and for good reason. And he's also priced here pretty highly on DraftKings. So I think that's a good kind of weigh, again, not that any of these guys will be particularly low owned at the top, but I think you can build some JT Xander lineups, right? Or JT Morikawa lineups, right? And use some of these 6K guys that no one's ever heard of. And I think that might actually be the key to a big win this week. Again, I'm not going to be doing it because I can't, but if I were constructing lineups, I would try and get a couple of these like really high price guys in there. Maybe grab like 2 10Ks, a 9K, and then like 3 7K, 6K type plays. So, and you can also go pretty far down the board, right? So I know we're jumping all over the place, but PGA Tour pros like Sepp Straka are 6,400. I think, in a field like this, like it's a no cut, like always go with the PGA Tour pro over a Scott Vincent who no one has ever heard of, or some of these other guys, right? Like I think there's definitely a path to, and again, not that Sepp Straka will be off anyone's radar. It's still projected to be 10% owned. But I think if you mix in a couple of those guys, play guys like, again, like a Morikawa JT lineup, I think that sets you up in a really unique place because a lot of guys are also going to gravitate to the 9K range. A couple guys that are also going to be pretty popular, Sunjae Im and Siwoo Kim. And a lot of that's because of the narrative around them and their military service. For me personally, I'm rooting for them a lot. I want to see them medal. I want to see them, break through and basically avoid their service time because it could be a career ender, right? We've seen that with Sangmoon Bae. So for me, I'm not financially staking any of that, right? Like I have no idea if the pressure is going to get to them. I have no idea how they're going to play. So for me, they're not even necessarily rating out that well in the model. So I'm just going to root for them personally on a personal level, but not necessarily stake them this week. A couple other guys that I think are really interesting to me. So Answer is doing a really good job of pounding fairways. His medium range irons are in good shape. I worry that some of the longer holes, like on the 620-yard par fives, he's not going to be able to reach into. So things like that give me a little bit of pause on Answer this week, but I totally get it. I think he may be live for, a top 5 finish kind of thing. But I don't know that he hasn't won professionally, right? Outside of, some really strong performances, though. I'm not sure that this is the spot that he's going to get a gold medal. So not going to be on Answer, but I do really like, again, just for me personally this week, we'll jump over to the betting card in a second. Justin Thomas, and if I'm going internationally, Joaquin Niemann are going to be my 2 plays. Other guys that I think are really solid. So Rory's projected to come in a little bit lower, so you could mix him in with maybe some more popular kind of mid and lower tier guys, right? So just if you're playing DraftKings, just make sure every lineup has some contrarian pieces in it, and you're not playing all of these 27% owned guys. That's basically, it's kind of a crapshoot this week. We don't have a lot of data. I think we have a model that makes a lot of sense, but there's only 60 guys in the field. There's going to be some volatility, so just embrace it. Guido is in the field for this week. He's not projected to be the most popular 8K guy, but I do like him a lot. Again, the only thing holding him back is in his PGA Tour starts, he hasn't really done a great job of hitting fairways. So I think for me, I would totally consider him as like a viable top 5 bet. I think he's like 9-1 to top 5. I think that's a really strong bet. I'm not going to personally do it because I'm keeping it kind of light this week, but maybe as a guy to, consider a little bit further down the board, for DraftKings, but also for like a, top 5, top 10. Could totally see riding the Guido machine for another week. We mentioned Romain Langescu. Norlander's also a guy. He's going to be a bit more popular though at 6,800. So again, I could see using him. So like he's going to be 18% owned as a 6K guy. I think he's a smart play. I probably would not build too many Victor Hovland, Henrik Norlander lineups, right? Like you don't want to use the chalk at the top and the bottom unless you're getting really weird in the middle. So just keep your total lineup ownership at a reasonable level, and I think it'll give you a shot this week. The other guy I really like, again, I'm not betting anyone else outside of JT and Neiman this week, but Cam Smith, again, really strong from a long-range iron perspective, so top 20 in all 3 kind of key proximity distances. He's also a really sharp putter. He's good around the green, so it may help if we're totally off in the model this week, and this plays a little more difficult than we're expecting. So Cam Smith, I think, is really interesting in the upper 9s. It's just really hard to use those guys if you're going at the top. So, again, maybe as a way to get a little bit different, you would maybe start with, a 10K guy, 11K guy, 2 8Ks, and then go really far down the board, right, to the 6K range. So just kind of think creatively about how to build lineups this week. You can kind of see from the ownership how most people's lineups are going to be constructed. So just try and get a little different from that. And again, I think it gives you a path. This Adria Arnis guy is really long off the tee. Again, I don't know anything about him. I don't think most people do, and they're lying if they say they do. I think could be totally viable as like a guy to mix in here. I believe he's from Spain, and he can hit it really far, which may be fine in this kind of course. So I would totally be looking to give him a shot this week. You could mix in some of these like 1% owned guys, but I'm not really excited about Jorge Campillo traveling across the globe on last second notice because of the ROM withdrawal. So I wouldn't really touch him. And Patrick Reed, I have an absolute ton of respect for doing this. So coming, from the Open Championship, then playing the 3M Open in Minnesota, and then flying all the way across the world to Tokyo. He's not even going to get a practice round in, but just from a solid Team USA, this is really noble of him to do that, especially when guys like Brooks and Cantlay, I think, had a shot ahead of him to come on after the Bryson withdrawal. So, just a ton of respect for Patrick Reed. I'll be rooting for him personally, but I think that's just way too much to ask of somebody, factoring in, jet lag and travel and not even getting a practice round before going out there. So just really, really cool that he's doing that. But again, I don't think he's necessarily a strong financial play to back this week. He'll be super low owned in fantasy though. So if you wanted to sprinkle him in, I could totally see it. Because he's another guy who gets fired up with these international competitions. So he's obviously performed very well in President's Cups, things like that. So those would be the positives for him. But I'm not even sure from a course fit perspective, his long irons aren't in that great a form. So I don't know. It's kind of tricky. I could see it just to be different with a handful of lineups in fantasy, but I probably wouldn't get there. Certainly not above some of these other guys. So sometimes it's, you want to be different, but you want to do it in smart ways. I'm not sure Patrick Reed is the guy to do it, but on a personal note, fantastic and totally supported 100% what he's doing. And then from there, some of these other guys just not rating out very well in the model. So I just to see Bezadenhu 10%, Munoz at 15, Sanjay and Siwoo, the only reason they're getting any sort of love this week is because of the narrative behind them. I'm just not seeing it. Again, it's unfortunate. I'm really rooting for them. I hope they do well, but if they're going to be that popular and they're not grading out as great statistical plays, I just don't know how you can do it. So I'm sure one of them will play well. Hopefully one or both play well enough to medal, but it's just not a smart data play. Maybe you could bet them as a top 5 and fade them in fantasy, so that way you're covered, something like that. But I just wouldn't touch it otherwise. And that's probably it for me. I guess you can mix in some Matthias Schwabs, some of these Euros you don't have a lot of data on, but guys that have good pedigree. So Leishman, Rasmus Højgaard. Leishman's not a Euro, but you get the idea. These guys do just show up sometimes randomly, so you could totally mix in some of these guys that are going to be lower owned. So I think that's totally viable. Thomas Detry is another example of that. So again, for me, it's a week that I'm not going to get too crazy with. I'm really going to be anchoring on Justin Thomas. He's a great statistical play, plays well in these international competitions, and I get to root for Team USA. So super pumped about that. But then the other guy I'm really anchoring on for my card is Joaquin Niemann, because I think this course sets up really well for him. And I think his unappreciated distance off the tee and the fact that he's coming in good form with his long irons, I think that just helps him a ton. So we're going to basically bet on hitting fairways not being the most important thing this week. Again, I think JT's coming in a little bit better form, having gained off the tee at the Open Championship. So but he's just super hit or miss with the driver, right? Some weeks he has it, some weeks he don't, and we're going to hope that this week he does. So that's how we have arrived at our betting card. So this is basically how we're setting it up for the week. I'm betting 2 guys. I'm going to have 3 units in play. I'm basically allocating most of that to kind of the main outright tickets. And then again, this is not really a research-based play, but I get to root for a Team USA narrative here a little bit. So I'm also parlaying both of my outright winners and JT and Joaquin Niemann with Nelly Korda. So I can root for kind of that side of things. And hopefully we get the dream Team USA win. Both get the gold medal, JT and Nelly Korda, with a pretty nice payout if all of this hits, right? So this is just totally chasing upside. I'm not totally expecting to bring this back, but I do like the idea of anchoring on a smaller card this week. And if you wanted to layer in some top 5s, top 10s, I think you can totally do that. And I would just lean on guys at the top of the model that have a little bit deeper odds. So guys like Guido, guys like even Paul Casey. I don't think you're going to get a great top 5, top 10 number on a lot of those guys, but as a way to kind of, protect yourself a little bit. For me, I'm just kind of YOLOing it a little bit and just keeping it light. I'm not doing any fantasy, so 3 units for me is kind of on the lighter side for the week. So I'm super excited. I can't wait to sweat some primetime golf. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. My energy level has definitely increased throughout the week, getting more and more pumped up about this. So hopefully you guys are too. But yeah, for me, I'm just going to be rooting for Team USA here, riding Justin Thomas, who, think can play well and sets up really well for the course and has a lot of, skills in the bag a lot of different clubs in the bag to carry him. So I like that kind of well-roundedness. And again, I don't think there's more than maybe 15 guys that can win this event. So I don't think you're missing out. Like if you take 2 guys, like you're capturing 15-20% of the win equity. So for me, I think that's really solid, and I'm not going to overextend it this week. You could certainly, reduce your allocations and grab a couple more guys. Like I'd strongly consider Victor Hovland and Paul Casey from an outright perspective, but for me, I'm just picking a lane, right? So I don't want to spread it too thin. At the end of the day, you're not bringing in too much profit because everyone's odds are relatively low because it's such a limited field. So that's the other side of it. So we'll just go big or go home with these guys, and then just a little bit of a YOLO parlay with the women's event and grab some Nelly Korda as well. So that's it for me. Probably not going to do an update before things kick off here tomorrow, but best of luck if you are tailing any of this. I do like to root for the Team USA narrative, if you can't tell, so that was the tiebreaker for me. But again, I could totally see grabbing Victor Hovland, Paul Casey, etc. So those would be my 3-4 favorite plays of the week, and I'm obviously betting 2 of them. So if you're tailing any of this, good luck. Maybe we'll do an update, partway through the Olympics or something like that, just to take a look at the leaderboard, see if there's anything interesting. Because I do think it's a viable strategy. If you just wait around and JT gets off to a slow start, or anybody else that you might like, if they get off to a slow start, their odds are probably going to drop a little bit. And since this is a no-cut event, they could totally come back and, shoot a 62 the next day and get back in the mix. So that might be another way to think about it too, if you're not super thrilled about having to stake, more than a unit or so on some of these shorter guys to bring anything noteworthy home. So maybe another way strategically to set up your card for the week. You could just bet some of the longer guys to start and then maybe add live over the weekend or something, a stud like Justin Thomas or Xander or something like that. But for me, just going to have fun with this week, kind of, use the time a little bit to decompress. I may use this window, though, to put out some maybe more educational content as a whole. So instead of going too heavy into the research for this event, obviously, trying to keep it a little bit light, I may do like a strokes gained overview, right? We talk about these numbers all the time. Like, is everyone on the same page as to what they mean and what it represents and how it's all calculated, right? We could also do kind of a, best practices for setting up a betting card, right? Versus, your fantasy play, or at least how I think about it. So that way you're kind of naturally hedging a little bit so you don't get cleaned out every week, right? So just some things that, helpful tips independent of whatever your event you're playing or week you're playing, just some things that might be helpful. So more to come on that here later this week. So we'll use this window for that as well. But again, best of luck if you're tailing any of this. Hopefully you learned something. Let's go get a gold medal, Team USA, and we will talk soon. Thanks, guys.